So, folks, welcome to our webinar today, live and online with industry experts. I think we all know that LA County and the state of California are mega investors and buyers and purchasers in the tune of billions of dollars each year. And how they do that, I mean, I don't think there's a question how much there is. There's just a great deal, and it's ongoing. In my 35 years of working with the state, it's ongoing. Good times, bad times, and whatnot. So it's wonderful to talk to folks who can help with their experiences, Rebecca and Chad's case, and their experiences tell us and give us insights into the how, and into what could be some of the steps based on their successes, based on their experiences that that can help guide us. I have a poll. One of the things I'm interested in. Let's see if I can just do this. I'm going to start it. Bam. For the folks that are there now, do you work with both of them now? Do you work with both LA? Do you work with the state of California executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, and whatnot? So it's all 100% at one vote so far. Oh, got 3 just the state and 1 at both. That's very cool. So thank you for that. That's really nice. We greatly appreciate that. So this could be a great insight into LA County, for example. They are a multi-$8 billion a year buyer, as they state on their website. So. And we're going to begin our conversation with Rebecca. Now, just a bit of background. My name is Matt, work for YB Marketing. We take on sales and marketing processes, so you don't have to. Somebody's probably already stole that line in a company somewhere, but and I try to put on these events monthly, quarterly, where we can talk to industry experts and gain insights. A lot of our work is with small businesses, but it's also with notable integrators who are looking for small business partners. So so let's start the conversation around LA County. Oh, I should mention also, this is not we want this to be as interactive as you folks you participants will allow. So I will ask questions all day because I drink plenty of coffee to fuel my questions. But really, the goal is to have your questions answered. So at any point you have a question, please type into the Q&A, and we will pay attention to that and bring it up to the panelists. So with that, let's start with Rebecca. Okay, Rebecca, tell us a little bit about. So you have a tremendous background. I posted this on LinkedIn. You worked for Deloitte. You've actually worked for LA County. You worked for eRepublic. One of the questions I have is, what is a chief technology translator? Because that is a very interesting. I've never spoken to a chief technology translator before. What does that person do?
You probably haven't, because I invented that title. So I may be the only one. And if you see others picking it up, I might take credit for that. But the work that I did at LA County was in a communications role within the IT organization, the operational IT provider, and we'll get into sort of the structure of LA County shortly. But it felt suited to the role that I had, which was often translating the value of technology to, quote unquote, the business side of organizations. I also, as sort of a pet peeve and side note, frequently say, like, there's no such thing as just a technology project, or there's no such thing as a business project. There are business projects with technology components, technology as an enabler. So, I was finding myself frequently in the position of just making sure everyone knew what we were talking about, and sometimes sort of talking down the techies to really make sure that their language was understood, so the value of technology could be understood by organizations across the county.
Was that not only internal to the 37 departments, and I guess 37 CIOs, correct? I know we'll talk about the structure, but that translation took place not only was it internal and also external, or all of the above?
Yeah, so some of my role at LA County involved working with the vendor community. So there's certainly a lot of partnership, especially at an operational IT providing department, and really at any of the departments. So engaging them in a way that they understand, similar to what we're doing today, the value of working with LA County to create a more diverse pool of businesses that they could work with, making it more competitive in terms of the choice that LA County had in terms of who they worked with. So there was some external communications that I worked on and planning some events and things like that in person when we used to do that. And also, yes, working alongside what they refer to, a term that we don't hear often in government, but the customer. So that in their case, the customer was other departments who utilized the services of the Internal Services Department. So for those who work with the state, since we have some people who work sort of exclusively with the state, the Internal Services Department at LA County is somewhat similar to DGS, or maybe DGS in the old days when it also had responsibilities over technology. So sort of like a DGS and CDT combined.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because a lot of the we did a poll for those folks who are joining in now, but we did a poll about who works with, or what do you folks on what do the participants on the call, who do you folks work with, like LA County and the state, or one or the other? There was a lot of conversation around the state. Mostly 83% of you answered the state, and LA County has that kind of feel often where it's so big, and a lot of folks don't entirely know where to start. And you just mentioned DGS, so perhaps we can take on how IT. By the way, the audience participants and our work, I think, amongst the panelists is, the 35 years of mine has all been in IT, goods and services with Unisys, or even Wang Laboratories, for heaven's sake. So that really puts a date on my forehead right there. But so how is IT structured, and who's who, if you will, in LA County, Rebecca?
Yeah, and I see we have a few extra people who just joined recently. So I'll actually, if I could, introduce myself really briefly, and then I'll get into sort of the structure of IT at LA County. So hello, everyone. Thanks for being here with us today. And I'm looking forward to speaking with Matt and Chad. Rebecca Friedman, some of you may know me from my role at eRepublic when I was national conference director for them. So some people would see me at those different events. Before that, I do have a background in systems integration work. I did a number of years with state and local consulting with Deloitte Consulting, mostly on the change management and training side. So got my sort of interest in how projects can be more effective. And after leaving eRepublic, I went to LA County. So my passion for government stayed, and I found a role that it was really suited to me at LA County. So I felt like when I started that role, I knew pretty well about LA County, but there's a lot to sort of unpack as you start working within the organization. So I can sort of start at the high level and then kind of narrow it down. So Matt did say there are 37 departments, and so that means there are 37 CIOs. Some folks at the department levels don't necessarily hold that CIO level, that CIO title. And I'll get into why that is. Typically, it's with the smaller departments. And there are soon to be 38 departments. The WEDAX department, Workforce Development, Aging, and Community Services, which, as you can tell from the name, is quite a complex department with a lot of responsibilities, is in July splitting into 2 departments. Those directors have already been appointed. And they're working out sort of the logistics there. So likely there'll be even more opportunity to kind of engage at the department level now that there'll be 38 departments plus commissions and other additional organizations. So within LA County, it is a federated model, often referred to as decentralized, similar to the state of California, in that there is an office of the CIO. That office is a strategic office. They report to the CEO's office, and they set strategy for IT across the county. So it's to some degree, their role is to collaborate with the departments, all of the other departments, all 37, soon to be 38 departments, and set a strategy. In some cases, there are services that are mandated by the board, so the strategy there would sort of come out of the office of the CIO. Certain things relating to security, centralized email, other shared services type of things that you can probably imagine. And then there's also the Internal Services Department, which, like I said, is similar to the Department of General Services and CDT combined. So ISD has responsibility over purchasing and contracting, maintenance services, energy services for the county, as well as information technology services. So that group, Information Technology Service, ITS, has branches within that. And they have an acting director at the moment, Benny Chaco. Their director who had been with the county, I believe 36 years, Dave Westlake, my former boss, recently retired. And so they are doing an acting rotation at the moment. Many of you may know, if you work with the county, you might know Benny Chaco. He had been, or I believe still probably has a lot of responsibilities over that shared services branch. So email and a number of those other kind of customer facing responsibilities. So each department then has the option to utilize those ISD services to sort of, not really whatever degree they choose, but there's usually hosted and non-hosted departments. Pretty obvious through the name. Hosted departments receive more services from ISD, almost sort of a full service managing of a number of their IT operations. Not all necessarily. And the strategy is usually coming in the direction leadership coming from the department level. And then there's non-hosted departments, which are really utilizing a very limited set of services. I hate to use the word mandated in government, but services that are quasi-mandated through the Board of Supervisors. So I'll kind of stop there.
Well, that would be my next question. So are the 36 CIOs, so you have the Bill Keogh position, which Mr. Keogh is off to the state of Washington, if I recall correctly. And they serve as guidelines, right? You mentioned guidelines, but they're not necessarily mandated. So if they're establishing guidelines for, say, cybersecurity, which translates usually into what our audience may be very interested in, goods and services, are they actually setting a mandate or a guideline for a technology by name? And then they are mandating that to the 37, or do the 37 departments they can follow the guidelines if maybe they're working directly with the executors of that, which I believe is ISD, correct? Or
yeah,
ITF.
and in sort of a complicated fashion with a large, complex organization like LA County, it's sort of all of the above. Okay. In some cases, a strategy is set, and the requirement to sort of fulfill those mandates or that set of requirements is given to the departments, and they can execute on that as long as they sort of meet those minimum sort of SLA type of requirements. That could be under security, it could be any number of things. Then there are other things like the data center, which are mandated to use the services provided by the county. Email is another one. They are a Microsoft shop for email. So that's another one that they don't really have the option to go out at the moment anyway and procure services for email. That's centralized and directed there. Then they have the option of kind of brokering services either directly through a vendor or through ISD. So as we kind of get into what matters, which I think is what matters anywhere in any government organization, which is building relationships with both ISD and at the department level always matter. And it matters for the hosted departments and it matters for the non-hosted departments, because they either have the option of, they always have the option. They will take make the decision to procure directly through the departments to the vendor, or they have the option to broker that licenses, software, hardware, whatever it may be, through ISD. So either way, having relationships at the department level and at the ISD level really matter.
So does that mean, when you say broker and you say, now there are, like in the state, when we talk to new companies going in the state, we talk about deep relationships and building relationships. And then, of course, coupled directly with that are contracts and certifications. Does LA County have, we talked a little bit about this we used the term thresholds, where the state has a $250,000 thresholds for small businesses, which means they need 2 phone quotes. And that's really it. They don't have to advertise beyond so does LA County then have, would you say the same thing in LA County, that you're pretty much, you should really get on a contract, and or do these departments have the ability to acquire what they want under a thresholding kind of system?
So, I mean, with ISD, you're always dealing with ISD because ISD manages procurement and contracts for the County of Los Angeles. So you're always going to sort of be going through them for some way, shape, or form. But I think you're getting toward kind of set asides and certain benefits for preference. So there are actually no what I would call set asides typically at Los Angeles County. LA Metro frequently has set asides because they are receiving and I don't want to say it never happens at LA County, but typically you don't see set asides, but you frequently will see set asides for LA Metro and some other special districts. That's usually because they're receiving grant funding, federal grant funding, which has a requirement around a set aside. However, there are bid preferences. So 15% bid preference for, and I'll make sure I'm saying all the acronyms right and things like that.
Sure.
Community Enterprise, which is DVBE, Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise. And then coming soon, they are looking into a community enterprise for LGBTQ. Social enterprise also receives a 15% bid preference. So that's like a B Corp. Or similar organization, not nonprofit. It's B Corp and similar organizations like that. And then local small business enterprise. And I want to emphasize that it's not just small business enterprise; it's a local small business enterprise. So you have to have a business registered in LA County to receive that 15% benefit.
So 15%, sorry, but does that 15% apply statewide to a DVBE though, a Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise, or is that also local only?
That, as far as I know, is not required to be local. So that is, the owner, and actually doesn't need to be even statewide. It could be a national organization that is DVB owned. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, that's yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I sort of say to a lot of people, like the barrier to entry can feel overwhelming for the state. It can feel overwhelming for LA County, and because there are these bid preferences, there's a lot of opportunity for smaller businesses to partner with larger organizations, with medium-sized businesses. If you have one of those categories, finding a way that you can add value, and I absolutely am not talking about pass-through contracts, because that's a whole other thing, and that's a whole conversation for another day that I choose not to really have very often. But if you are looking at a way to add value to a contract because you provide certain services, and you happen to have one of those preferential categories, that is really beneficial there to larger organizations. Everyone is, because of the complexity of LA County and because of the size of LA County, similar to a state of California or other full states with 10 million plus residents, 110,000 employees, the complexity of things is such that it's not very likely that just one company can provide all of the services needed, particularly on large technology integration projects, maybe in terms of software or hardware. But even then, if you're looking at a large contract, the scale and the volume that needs to be provided to an organization like that really requires a sort of all hands on deck approach. So I think that's where I encourage people, when they're starting to feel overwhelmed or when they are looking at the master service agreements that are offered through LA County, and there are quite a few there's 4 for different technology services. It can take quite a while to get on those. There's a lot of legal red tape. There's a lot of administrative work. So in the time when you're working toward that, or even obviously once you get on those master service agreements, even more appealing to partner. It can be a way to sort of cross that threshold and start working with organizations. So again, relationships. So it's not just those relationships internal to government. It's also those relationships with other members of the vendor community.
And you would suggest, although I think you mentioned that a contract in LA County can take 6 months to a year to be added to it, and there's a great deal of value, like in the state with an SLP or CMAS or whatever it may be. And I know Chad can add to that, but while you are marketing essentially, or while you are talking and going to events and reaching out to advocates in LA County, it would be advisable to get on ITSMA or some of those various contracts.
Yeah, so ESMA, particularly the Enterprise Master Service Agreement, which is for services, is certainly one to look at getting on. The thing to keep in mind with ESMA is that although it does allow partnering in delivery of contracts, the prime, which is the one who goes through the process to be pre-qualified under ESMA, is required to hold all of the qualifications for any given project they're responding to. So even though partnering can help in terms of kind of getting things moving along, the prime, the ESMA contractor does need to have all those qualifications. ITSMA is more sort of staff augmentation. And then there are actually some changes happening with that one and how it's managed. So I would say, make sure that you have a conversation with the team at ISD who manages the ITSMA contract.
Yeah.
Very close to when you're about to apply, because there are some changes happening right now. TESMA, which is the telecommunications. So if you happen to be within the telecommunication industry, that's a very specific master service agreement. And then the BSAP contract is a recent one, probably within the past 6 months that came out. So that's for BSAP, which is the voting system for all people, the Registrar Recorder County Clerks system that they've been working on to make voting accessible and widely available across the county. So a lot going on there, and they have their own pool of vendors under certain VSAP categories that you can get qualified for. So some of them are simply operational, some of them are IT related, some of them are equipment related. So and when Chad starts talking, I can probably pop some of those links into the chat so people can pull up the VSAP contract and some other things.
Well, and I think as we transition into the state, one of the things that we do quite frequently for some of the small businesses is really get them used to the fact that not only are we going to advocate for them at the various county departments that make sense for them, and even on a global scale, the cities and counties that make sense for them, but also to the partner world. And part of the research that's kind of fun is looking into who is really active. Is it Salesforce? Is it Deloitte, your former position? Who is really active? Is it CGI? Who is it? And then we can, not only are we trying to work with the county or the state or the cities, but we're also trying to connect with partners who have, like you're mentioning, that will fulfill some of those elements that they need to in the contract, and are looking for those partners that can actually execute. So last question, Rebecca, although I'm sure I have many more. But is there a getting started? We a lot of us come from kind of the sales background and the marketing background, but do you feel like LA County is somewhat receptive of new ideas, and do they have a group? Do they have a means by which they listen to new ideas and technology and goods?
Yeah, I think with an organization as large as a jurisdiction as large as LA County, I think that's I sort of geek out when I think about government, and I think anyone who is in this industry should be passionate about it. You shouldn't just be here because you like IT or whatever else. You have to really sort of have a passion and have a thick skin and be ready to be in, but also see the huge impacts that can be made. And again, when you're talking about scale, it's not just the volume of software, hardware, delivery of services. it's also the volume of the impact that can be made. I mean, it's incredible when you think about, again, 10 million plus residents or 110,000 plus employees across the county of Los Angeles. The impact that can be made are huge, and the innovation that they can take on. I think sometimes we see large jurisdictions that can feel a bit risk adverse because of the risk is also increased when there's such weight and such dollar amounts behind things. But there absolutely are innovative things happening in a large jurisdiction in LA County, and the opportunity to participate in those is incredible. So, you have certain individuals who I think are a little more willing to kind of take on that risk because they see that the impact that can be made is really, sort of, I think you can find sort of kindred spirits in that way. But yeah, absolutely. There's innovation, there's projects happening all the time, exciting things to take on.
Well, and you've mentioned LA Metro, for example. Some enjoy kind of this, or advertise even an unsolicited proposal. So if you have an out-of-the-box technology that you put in another county somewhere, there are avenues to package that up, if you will, and bring that to the county and say, look what we've done with these folks, or look what we've done with Texas, or look what we've done with. When I was at Unisys, that was our big way of introduction to, if we built out Motor Voter in Texas, then we brought it to DMV back in the day. And we said, look what we did for these folks. And we saw legislation coming down the pipe for California around Motor Voter. And that was a storyline. It wasn't just it was a helpful storyline, if you will. It was a different way to open up a door.
Yeah, and you're right. LA Metro does have that unsolicited proposals that can be sent in year round through their Office of Extraordinary Innovation, which is an organization that's in sort of parallel and works alongside their Office of CIO. But what I would say is whenever you see an opportunity like that, if you see, an unsolicited proposal, don't treat it like a completely unsolicited proposal. Still build those relationships with those organizations, still make yourself known. It will make the impact of an unsolicited proposal all that much more impactful if what you're talking about is unsolicited, but not a surprise to people. Is how I would say. I mean, you still need to know enough about their organization to make sure it's the right fit. It's not a means to just send in, we've done this work and sort of market yourself that way. It's a way to find and showcase exactly how much you know about an organization and how, what a tool or what a project would do to help them. And that should be out of ideally having had conversations with the leadership of organizations and with people at all levels of that organization.
That's a very, very important point. And I know Chad echoes that point. And Rebecca, thank you very, very much for the time. It's wonderful to hear about, a lot of times what we try to do is a bit of breaking down barriers. We all know we're going to put in the work. I'm sure every participant on this knows there's no easy path, if you will. They're not just going to get a CMAS contract and get an order, but at the same time, it's really encouraging to hear what is happening at LA County and what steps there may be. And there have been times where they've had events, as you recall, from GovTech or TechWire, and I want Chad to really focus on that too, because he has some avenues into that, but where they've done some events that are not, astronomically priced to help introduce businesses to LA County. So thank you. And folks on the call, please feel free to throw in questions. Anything from any questions you want to talk about. And Rebecca, you're more than welcome to stay on board and
I will. I want to hear what Chad says, so I'll stick around.
And one thing that is fun to talk about, I was going to share my inbox because we get hundreds, 187 bids that have come out. Now, it's a collection of counties, cities, but the dominant source is LA County and, of course, the executive branch of the state of California. So, whether or not I want to talk to Chad about reply, not reply. What do you do with bids? Do you respond to every one of those things? So let's make the transition from LA County into the branches of the state of California with Chad Hodges. Hello,
Thanks for
Chad.
having me today. Yeah, Rebecca, great job. Honestly, I think she could do this whole session by herself because just as strong as she is in LA County, she's as strong at the state level too. I mean, her depth of experience at all levels, not just in this beautiful state, which is my home state, of course, of California, but she's got national exposure too. So if
More
you're
fun to sit back and listen to you, though.
yeah, you're too kind. So the depth of experience is it's amazing. So Rebecca, you've always been a rock star in my mind. So yeah, thanks for having me.
I echo that, and it's wonderful to have industry experts on a call. Anyway. So Chad, tell us about your background.
Sure.
What's the work you have? How did you start in government? How many years ago was that? So tell us about yourself, sir.
Yeah, it's been a fair amount of time. I mean, my government life started when I joined the Marine Corps in the mid 90s. Pretty quickly, I realized coming out of the Marine Corps that I had a knack for government consulting. That I had my first job out of the Corps was NCI WorldCom, and we had 28 different state contracts, 28 different states, I should say, contracts for emissions testing and fish and game wildlife, licensing and things of that nature. We also had national, federal contracts as well with my group, and that's when I figured out I really liked it. It was something that I enjoyed doing. I'm an engineer and a project manager by trade. But soon after NCI WorldCom, I did a stint with Homeland Security through a software company, and then landed at Enterprise Networking Solutions with my former business partner, Paul Smitham. And we recently transacted and sold our company in August of last year. And I made the full-time switch over to my small business DPBE that I started in 2010 called HSB Solutions. And I'm now working exclusively there and doing some pretty fun and exciting things around business development and government relations consulting, helping companies that are trying to navigate this ecosystem and understand it, trying to take some of the maybe the trepidation that they have, because if they don't know, sometimes they're hesitant to come into the market, or if they are bullish about coming into the market and they really want to, making sure that I show them how to navigate that in an efficient manner, and also a responsible manner, because selling to government is not the same as selling to commercial and enterprise. They are different markets, and they have different rhythms, and they have different expectations, and they have vehicles and all these other complexities that need to be navigated. So,
but now wait a minute, Chad. That was a nice bio on you, sir. But I know more about you. Because you're very much committed to a very, very important and special group of folks. And that's the veterans of California. And it goes beyond the veterans of California, but you have this tireless work ethic, which I wish I had 10% of in the disabled veteran space. So please, just without, I know you may not even want to, not glorify yourself, but talk about it. But it's just a really important work that you're doing. You had your event last night. So describe a little bit about the DVBE space that you work in, and even working with the legislature.
Yeah, absolutely. So being a disabled veteran myself, it's a cause that's near and dear to my heart. We have a lot of veterans that come back from, service that they struggle mightily, right? And whether it's drugs or alcohol or depression, I mean, we have, when you think about what combat means for veterans and coming back, and what the impact and stigma can be around that. A lot of folks, we're all human. We're just trying to, deal with the traumas that we experience, whether it's as an adolescent or as an adult. And the coping mechanisms are different for everybody. And so for me, it's about really trying to make sure that veterans that need, maybe a little bit of assistance or need a leg up, especially getting back to activities that make them happy. That is something that's near and dear to my heart, because if you are doing activities that are healthy and positive and are impactful, chances are of you getting out of any funk that you might be in are a lot higher. So whether that means I want to play more golf, or it means I want to get back into activities that I couldn't, but now I've got a prosthesis and I need to figure out how to do it in a modified way. The organizations that I tend to work with, Patriots Honor and Vet Fund, are organizations that are looking to help finance those things, right? So if I had one veteran years ago, he lost both of his legs stepping on a landmine. And, when he was a young man, he liked to ride motorcycles. And for him, it was just like, if I could ride again, that'd be amazing. Well, we went and found a motorcycle shop in LA that was willing to modify a tricycle, right? So it wasn't a straight up two-wheeler, but it was a three-wheeler. And they were willing to modify it for his injuries and give that to him. And that was like, it was life altering for him, because it gave him the freedom to do something he used to love doing, right? Which is get on a ride and do it for hours and feel the wind in his hair and do all that cool stuff, right? So it's just those types of things. In last night's event, in one night we raised, I think $30,000, doing sort of a just something fun that a lot of people like doing anyway, which was a scotch tasting, right? So everybody got to try all the different scotches that exist and single malts and kind of go through that and educate their palate, which was fun. But then they also got to go to a card room and do a little gambling and the fun thing about that is, the more people tend to win, they tend to give too. So it ended up just sort of being an all-around blessing in disguise last night. It was really, every time I do one of these events, I'm just humbled by the commitment that people have to this community. So
when you are advocating for the disabled vet, and I know you work, as we all do, we work a lot in IT and technology. How do you encourage them? What's some of the, because again, we know that there's set asides, as Rebecca mentioned, and it's still a tough road to hoe, it's still a tough road to get business, if you will. So what is the encouraging factors that you see to a disabled vet enterprise to work?
So the one thing about California that I really do love is we have the largest veteran population of any of the 50 states, right? So, and that's probably a lot to do with our beautiful weather and the fact that we have beaches and we have mountains and we have all kinds of really great activities that you can do in this wonderful state. And I think that bodes well to that. But it also means that we as a state invest in our veterans. In 2010, we passed legislation that required a certain percentage of all contracts, not just technology, but all contracts be done with veterans. So that means it gives them a leg up, in construction, gives them a leg up in technology, you name it, it gives them a little bit of a set aside for them to not just do the business directly with the state of California, but also, to Rebecca's point, work with those bigger firms that maybe don't have the ability locally to provide resources and get them where they need to be. I think that's one big thing that I think a lot of the bigger companies are starting to finally get their minds wrapped around is, if you want to really have speed and agility, you usually have to work with local resources. And local resources usually tend to not be as expensive, because they don't have the T&E, the cost overhead overruns, especially if they're a small business or disabled veteran. They tend to not be as big a corporation, so just the sheer administrative overhead doesn't exist. So, and the fact that they have relationships, it means that you can usually help the bigger integrators that are looking at this massive effort, to do something. They can do discrete pieces of that work and contribute at a very high clip. So,
okay, very good. Do you find has there ever been a time when you wish you didn't deal with government, or do you find that it's just, I found that after we got in the processes now over 3 decades ago, that it was really a relationship, as you folks are describing, it was really relationship based.
Yeah.
And I actually thought, as a taxpayer, as a small business, I actually had a voice there, which I know sounds, I never thought if I called on Sutter Health in Sacramento that I had any chance, but in the government, I feel like I have almost a right to compete and almost so, is there ever a time where you think, I should have done healthcare over the government?
No. So it's funny. I get asked. So I sit on a lot of boards and bureaus, and I speak at events across this beautiful country where we talk about why you should have a government practice, right? If you're a software company, a hardware company, a platform company, whatever you are, if you aren't doing something with government, you're crazy. Because the reality is, there may be a lot more rigor involved and bureaucracy in terms of affecting change and being able to, execute work. But the reality is government is recession proof, right? And the recessions happen like clockwork almost every 10 to 12 years. And if you don't have some sort of government capability, the government always pays their bills. They just do. Private sector companies don't always pay their bills and, tend to run away real quick when a recession happens. So I tell everybody that has hesitation or trepidation, work with folks that know how to navigate it to make it more efficient and palatable for you. Because the reality is, once you're in, it might be hard to get in, but once you're in, those relationships that you cultivate and invest in tend to pay off dividends years after years, right? I mean, I've been, ENS, when we sold the company in August, was 22 years old, 22 and a half. That paid dividends. And I got to say, I tell people this story all the time. We had done, we had celebrated our 20th anniversary right before the pandemic. Then boom, the pandemic hits. We had all these master contracts. We had all these amazing relationships with folks that we had worked at, with for decades at the state of California and the local gov level. Who do you think they called when the proverbial, what hit the fan, right? It was folks that they had trusted for years and folks that they knew that they could get things done quickly with and that they weren't going to get worked over or taken advantage of. And so we got a lot of those initial phone calls about, technology they needed to buy for work from home and security and, it ran the gamut in terms of, stuff that we had to do to really ramp up. The state of California had a bold initiative. They had to send everybody home overnight, basically, right? Hundreds of thousands of employees. And I know LA was in the exact same boat, right? To do that at scale in weeks, not years, weeks, it was nothing short of a miracle. But it takes trust and it takes partnership and it takes relationships to affect that change. And it was pretty amazing to be able to see that. And then the other, if there's a positive that can come out of a pandemic, was we proved that technology could facilitate modernization at a rapid pace if it was allowed to, right? If the people that had the knowledge, right, both public and private, were able to team up and work together and affect that change and take a lot of the bureaucracy that typically is existing in government, the effective change could be dramatic. And it was amazing to see a lot of those use cases go into practice, and now they're in production. And these are things that prior to the pandemic, that'll take 4 to 6 years, and we'll get there eventually. No, we did it in like 4 to 6 weeks or months, depending on how big the scale was. There's still big initiatives in California that need to get done. We still need to modernize our payroll system, right? That's going to be a huge effort, but it's going through right now. The lessons they learned during the pandemic about challenge-based procurement are being applied to the payroll, modernization as well. So they're gonna be a little bit more not discreet. They're going to be a little bit more responsible about the pieces of the work that they take off, so that they don't have to try to boil the ocean and do this as one big monolith project. I think the days of monolithic projects are gone, but the small discrete work and showing that agility to affect change and get quick wins is going to be huge.
So when it comes to advice and getting started or just working in the state, we've had some events in the past where we've had Steve Lower on and yourself, and we've talked about software license programs, and we've talked about kind of versus CMAS, kind of versus NASPO, other things that are out there.
Yeah.
Do you have and sometimes the answer when someone asks us, what do I get on? We say everything, right? So, you got to register with every city, every county, you got to get on their contracts. And of course, that usually, obviously people make choices of where they want to work.
Yeah.
But is there a recommendation that you say that these in the IT space and the IT goods and services, this is the contract, or these are the top 2 things you've just got to do?
So actually literally just had this conversation with one of my clients this morning before I got on this webinar. The reality is you have to kind of, do a little bit of soul searching as a corporation. You have to internalize, what am I trying to do, right? There's vehicles for almost everything in every walk of life within California government, right? At all levels, and the state and the local level. So you have to analyze what your real strategy is for your company. If you have a target market of, state of California and you're a software company, SLP is really the main vehicle you want to get on in California as a software company. But if you have a national scope, you might want to look at doing NASPO and GSA first, so that then SLP ends up being a positive byproduct of you putting that time and energy into getting on a national contract first, right? So it really depends on, your market and your target market, where you're trying to go. Now, if you're a services company and you don't sell software, then CMAS or ITMSA, now TDDC, might be the more appropriate way to go, right? So you really need to do that analysis. And then the nice thing about California is most of the cities and counties, minus LA and San Francisco, for the most part, leverage the national contracts, NASPO, right? The only reason LA and San Francisco and the state of California do their own vehicles is because they are so big that they need to be able to make sure that they can control the revenues, one, that are being, spent in their territories, but also so that they get the types of engagement that they want, right? Sometimes NASPO can be a little bit more loosey-goosey in terms of, the people that they bring into their contract vehicles. And so, LA, San Francisco, and state of California, they really want to kind of focus on making sure that they're very careful about who they bring in. So they're not just bringing in every single company that exists on the planet, right? They want to make sure that the people that are allowed onto the vehicles go through the rigor of understanding what the security requirements are. They go through the rigor of understanding what engaging with government means in terms and conditions. Just all of that kind of stuff, right? So there's so many different policies that they want to make sure that people are understanding. That way they're not going through the exercise and not realizing what they're getting into, right? If you're going to come into government, it cannot be a swoop in, swoop out. It's an investment. You've got to stay focused. You've got to stay dedicated, and you got to see it through. And if you do, it pays off. You just got to be patient.
Yeah. Well, and so part of that, what Rebecca touched on, is partnerships. And so one of the things that we talk to everybody, and even the companies I sold for or marketed for, or those I consult with now, the goal is, your strengths, where you can execute to the fullest, where you have capacity to deliver. So it's not just as you're mentioning, a one and done. We're talking to departments, but we're also talking to partners, the larger entities. For a DBBE or a small business, do you encourage that same kind of approach where you're talking to departments, but you're also identifying, again, the CGIs, the IBMs, those on the SLP, where they have to have a 3 to 6 businesses to deliver their products? Would you say that's a similar strategy in the state?
I do. I would actually. And what I just talked to another manufacturer this morning, another conversation. They've only got 4 resellers currently on their SLP. They need some more diversity. So they want to have they want to have a DBBE. And the reality is, the state of California, each of the departments has a certain threshold that they are, mandated to try to achieve in terms of the amount of business that they perform or execute with small businesses and DBBEs. And so, I highly encourage the manufacturers to be very considerate of that, right? And if you can get a corporation that's a twofer, where they're a small business and a DBB, that's all the better, right? Because the state departments really like that kind of stuff. We're actually right now advocating for increasing the per deal size threshold from 250,000 to 500,000, and we've got support from both the House and the Senate to really support what we've got going on there. We just actually went through a whole sort of speed dating with all the assembly members and the senators, not all of them, but a big chunk of them, especially the heavy hitters, the influencers, and everyone's going, this makes sense. This is a no-brainer. We haven't had, in 12 years, we've not had an increase in that dollar amount, that per deal size dollar amount in 12 years. And in the meantime, inflation and cost of goods and all that's all gone up. Everything's gone up. So the competitiveness that DBBs and small businesses are allowed to have is impacted coming out of a pandemic. Coming out of a pandemic, you want to give them more opportunity to engage with government and more opportunity to be able to compete. And this is going to give them that. So Senator Archuleta has actually already ridden us into his bill that he's trying to get pushed through. So we've got some good support to move that threshold from 250K to 500K and really afford the ability, small businesses, the ability to do more engagement with government. So it's pretty exciting.
And just a plug for the world champion Rams. He's not related to the former safety Adam Archuleta, is he?
I have no idea, to be honest.
I'll ask him
next time I talk to him. Yeah.
Everybody in San Francisco is totally angry at me. There's complete anger at me right now for mentioning the Ram. Okay, so let's talk about it. It's one of the most important aspects, and I think we all know is engagement. So, we're always looking to engage small businesses often, and that's, often don't have the bandwidth to engage, don't have the, the squeaky wheel kind of thing to talk to the advocates, CIO, CISO, AIO, all of the different organizations. So how does, and I know you're involved in helping, even through an association, helping organizations, not only small, but large companies. So can you speak to how we engage as businesses with the state?
Yeah, my dad used to always say something, work smarter, not harder. And so I'm a big fan of trying to, especially as a small business, you want to make sure that you try to be introduced once but speak to many. And so there's a number of different associations that you can participate in. The newest one in California is called the Technology Association of California, and they've got the ability to, they've got a small business committee. They've got they as well have a legislative committee, procurement committee, and now a security committee, right, which will be co-chaired by a public-private entities. So, that actually is a really good way. Then also DGS themselves actually has a small business and DVB committee as well that you can be a free member of, and you can go in there and you can be on their monthly meetings and you can get more engagement. The reality is if you can get in front of as many eyes and ears as you can to expose them to your capabilities and your willingness to participate, that's always going to go extremely well. And I believe LA and San Francisco, I think, both have those same advocacy outreaches as well, right, Rebecca?
Yeah, in Office of Small Business, there's a number of ways to engage those local kind of bureaus that work directly either with those organizations or are part of. In LA County, you're right, it's part of LA County's organization. So definitely.
And that helps these companies that maybe feel like it's completely overwhelming. I have no salespeople. I can't beat the street and talk to, California has 140 some odd departments. LA has, close to 40 departments. San Francisco, I think, is somewhere in the 20 to 30 range as well. It's like, how do I do that? That seems so overwhelming. Well, the reality is going to these different associations and these different committees and putting yourself out there, in those circles is really going to get you more of that exposure. And I always, I tell this to a lot of larger corporations, but it's the same with small businesses and DVBEs as well. You need to be where they are, right? And that doesn't just mean going to webinars and things of that nature. If you know that there's functions throughout the year that you should be participating in, you want to make sure that you're present. And if you can't be present because dollar amounts, it's too expensive to go to the event yourself, work with your manufacturer partners to try to be able to participate in those events so you can be where they are and you can socialize and you can communicate, and do it the old-fashioned way. I'm a social person. I like being in front of people and talking to them and asking them how their families are doing and things of that nature. And you create a feeling, right? They want to engage with you because they see the genuineness of who you are. When you're authentic and you come across as wanting to help, especially in government when they're completely resource constrained, that's a positive. That's really, coming into any government entity and adding value instantly is a positive. It's always going to be seen as a positive. So
yeah, there's a lot of fun analytics in life, and one of them is this mere psychological effect, which fuels my marketing LinkedIn posting for our clients. And just the more we see somebody, the more likely we are to simply trust them. Yeah. Which is a little bit scary, I guess. But if you think about Geico and Home Depot and all these advertisements they can afford to do, when we think about when we have that need, and so that translates into this constant advocacy on behalf of an organization in sales and marketing. I mean, it's I've never in 35 years just gotten an order out of the blue. I mean, I may have once, maybe one time. But most of the time it's because we've had relationships or someone that knows we do it, and it just became time for them to.
The funny story, I don't know if it's a funny story, the interesting story that happened right at probably month 2 or 3 when we first got awarded the enterprise technology contracts, which are a mandatory hardware contract at the state level for 16 different OEM manufacturers, right? And we had, I think, 6 or 7 out of the 16, right? And it was month 2 or 3, and I get this phone call from one of my manufacturing partners. She's got a county wants to spend a bunch of money. She wants to buy a bunch of their product. And it's going to have to go through, if it goes NASPO, it's got to go out to a bunch of resellers. It's going to take a bunch of hoops. And she's like, well, can't cities and counties buy off that contract? I go, yeah, it's not mandatory. They don't have to buy off of it, but they can. And she goes, well, I think they want to because it's streamlined and it's easy and it'll go to a partner that, I know and trust and they know and trust in you. And I said, okay, well, let's do it. I didn't have any expectation that it would go fast because, nothing in government tends to go fast. 8 hours later, I had a PO. For $1.something million, right? And it was a security technology called Palo Alto Networks, and I was blown away. I was like, how did you guys do this? So I got to know the analyst, and she was an analyst at the county, at this county in the Bay Area, and she, was explaining to me, she's like, look, as long as we have an LPA and we were able to reference it, I want the best and final price, and this contract vehicle, the published rates are better than anybody's, including NASPO. So we wanted to, work, we just wanted it to be efficient. We're going to be working with a manufacturer, so, you're going to be the value-added reseller, but the reality is making things easy in government is always going to bode well. And that was a byproduct that I did not expect. And so when the pandemic hit, having a lot of those mandatory contracts already worked out, thank goodness to DGS and CDT and all those folks at the state levels, having all that stuff worked out meant all of the bureaucratic stuff about having to go through the bid process and having it be, a long drawn out system. During the pandemic, I'd never seen POs come out of the state of California in single days. And I was seeing it in hours. I mean, DOJ cut me a PO in probably 4 hours, and CDT cut me another one for, in a day, and just things I had not been used to seeing were able to that change was able to be effective because they put the time in to modernize their procurement methodologies and prior to the pandemic. So it worked out. So.
Yeah. As we close, by the way, folks, for those remaining, we still have a little bit of time for questions. I'll also summarize. We'll summarize the event and put in the links in an email to everybody the links provided and the associations Chad's talking about and the contact information for each of us. But it actually came out in the San Diego Tribune years ago where 90% of the procurements don't go to an advertisement because it's not fiduciarily responsible to go to an RFP, RFO if they can avoid it. And the point is that most of the acquisitions are done in a faster manner. There's just too many contracts to make it too much easier. So, there's a question for Chad. Could you repeat the name of the technology he suggested? Technology committee you suggested.
TechCA. Go to techca.org. They're a new nonprofit association here in California.
TechCA.org.
Thank you. Rebecca's all over it. It's signing up for that is if you're a private sector company, it's based on your revenues. So the membership goes anywhere from $1,500 a year to $7,500 a year if you're over $1 billion. I have small businesses signing up left and right for $1,500 because it just gives them, exposure to the right folks. So. Yeah.
And then on the county and city side, I would recommend taking a look at, these are government organizations, but MESAC and SISDA.
Oh yes.
You're not already involved in those. Those are for government members, but there are ways for the vendor community to engage. So,
oh my God, are they both .orgs? I do not recall.
I'll look them up.
I'd have to look them up.
I think they are.
Yeah.
I'm gonna click on the link I just provided. No, it's not. CIS is not .org. Oh, and the fun thing about some of those organizations, folks, is that they have venues to, we sponsored a lunch for MESAC, and it wasn't in the big MESAC hall. It was just a lunch where they all got together in Tulare County, and it was fun.
Like my original advice: be where they are, right? So if you want to engage with government, you need to participate in their events, right? At the state level, they do events with a number of different great organizations. Rebecca's former company puts on events multiple times a year, not just in California, but nationally, because they're a big national organization. The associations put on events a couple times a year. So anytime you can get, the state of California themselves also puts on an event. They do a cybersecurity event every October, which is actually really fantastic. They team up with Sec State, I think, now to do that one. The advice I would always give to anybody trying to engage and work with government is just be where they are.
Wonderful. All right, folks. Thank you for the participants. Thank you for the panelists. Any final comments? Rebecca, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate what Chad was saying. I just want to emphasize the idea of having a government-focused organization or even individuals within your company. And I say that also from a point of frustration, having been in government. There's nothing worse than when someone doesn't know your business. And we don't see this. I haven't experienced this in other industries I've worked around, that someone would not know the main components of a business. But frequently I saw that people would come into LA County and talk about the mayor. And for anyone who knows anything about government, there's no mayor of LA County, right? So, or talking about city this, city that, or the reverse, when it was, city organizations and hearing the word county, using the term city, state, and county interchangeably. it takes someone who has a basic understanding and at least a little bit of passion for government. So I guess I would encourage anyone to foster that passion for government in what they're doing.
Okay, wonderful. Chad, final comments, sir.
That's it. Be where they are.
All right. Everyone, thank you so much for your attendance today. Happy Friday to you all. We'll get an email out of all summarizing this, and we'll have this recorded and cut out any of my bad jokes, and we'll make it available to all. And look forward to thank you again, and we'll look forward to the next one. Okay.
Have a nice
Thank you,
weekend,
man.
everyone.
Thank you, Matthew, as well.
Take care,
Appreciate
guys.
it. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Bye.